since it's an English class, I feel like I should probably start with a story. Now, before I tell the story, I also want to mention a couple of things that I think you're probably already thinking. Namely, oh, it's an English class. I know exactly what we're going to do. We're going to do MLA format, which we will. We're going to rewrite papers, which we will. We're going to write the papers the night before. That never worked for me when I was your age as an undergraduate. If it works for you, try it. I always recommend starting things a little bit earlier so that you have more time to do it. But again, our schedules are all different and it can be hard. I'm a slow writer, so I need to really work in advance. But I often get questions about what makes for good writing. How do you do it? How do you write effectively? How do you write in such a way that you enjoy it? So as we go along over the next few weeks, I'm going to try to give you maybe little writing lessons, little pointers to think about as you're working on not just the papers for this class, but the writing that you have to do for any of your classes. My assumption is that a lot of you probably aren't necessarily thinking about being English majors. That's typical in the English 101 classes, and that's fine. My job is to try to help you improve your writing so that it's clear, so that it's precise, so that you feel comfortable no matter what job or what career you go into, knowing that you can effectively communicate your ideas to somebody else. It's a basic technology that we all need. We all need to know how to use it, and we all need to know how to use it effectively. So the first lesson that I want to tell you or talk to you about, and this relates in also with the first assignment that you're going to do and focus on this first week of class, is what I think of as the most important element, or the most important, I guess you could say, trait that we have as human beings that a good writer needs to develop and to privilege and to honor. And that would be this one. So here's lesson number one. And I have my whiteboard that I just bought at Target because I'm so used to having one in the classroom. I still want to be able to use one. And that's memory. So lesson number one is memory. Now, why do I use that word? It clearly is not one about writing good thesis statements or making sure your grammar is perfect or making sure that you have good conclusions to all your papers. So why do I use the word memory? The reason for that is that the best writers know that all powerful, compelling, emotional, thought-provoking pieces of work come from our ability to remember, to recall certain events, whether it's a reading that we did, if it's a personal narrative paper, whether it's something we experienced, to remember it in such a way that you can document it with words and then share it with somebody else. So to kind of get you thinking about why memory is so important, and I should mention it's a theme that's going to come up in a lot of our readings. You're going to see that for the first two readings that you do for this week. As I said, I want to tell you a story because on the questions that you're going to do for this week, and if you look on Blackboard, you're going to see that there's a 9-question sheet. I normally do these in the classroom, but you're going to be doing this at home. And a lot of it's really basic information that you can go over on your own. And this will count as your first reading quiz for the class. It's an easy 5 points if you answer all the questions. The most important one is the last one. I ask you to write a paragraph for me about a particularly memorable job experience that you've had. Now, it could have been a good experience. I find that students typically pick one that was more negative because there's more to write about, and those also make for funnier essays, as you'll see when we get a little further in the class. But I want you to think about that. What work experience, maybe, or volunteer if you haven't had a job yet, or even you haven't had one right at this point that you find particularly memorable, then you can also write about a volunteer experience. You could even ask someone else, a family member, for example, or a friend, about a memorable job that they've had. But I start with that because of the story. And I'm holding here a compact. It's a little handheld mirror. You can use one of these if you're trying to get ready to go to class. I do keep one in my office. My hair is pretty short at this point, so I don't have to worry about trying to comb it, particularly because I'm online here. But I want to show you this compact because the first job that I ever had, right out of high school, right before I went to college, summer before my first year of college, same experience you're having right now, was at a factory in Naugatuck, Connecticut, which is right next to my hometown of Waterbury, Connecticut, that made compacts like this. Or I should say, more specifically, they made the mirrors for the compacts. So I spent my time, from, I think it was probably by 8 in the morning I would start, and we'd work until, 4 or 5 o'clock. And I worked on an assembly line where these mirrors were manufactured. It was a really difficult job, very repetitive. It was physically demanding in a way that I hadn't anticipated. Just standing there for that many hours, my feet would hurt, my back started hurting. I was a lot younger than I am now. I was 17. My birthday's late, so I started college, when I was 17. So I was doing this job at that age, and I found it really difficult. Now, what made it valuable, aside from the discipline that I had to learn from it, were all the people that I met at the job and their kindness. And I want to give you an example that's part of the story. Even though my experience working on that factory assembly line was so difficult, and physically taxing, mentally taxing, because if you've ever done any kind of factory work like that, it's very repetitive, right? But one day during lunch hour, I decided that I was going to have a little can or little container of SpaghettiOs. Got it out of the vending machine, took it over. We had the little microwave in the dining area, which was right off of the factory floor. Took the top off of it, the little cardboard top, and I was very excited. I was really hungry. I think maybe I had some Cheerios for breakfast, and so I disassembled it. I got it ready. I set the timer correctly on the microwave, and I put it in, and I started it. And someone, my friend Ron, who had taken me under his wing, jumped out of his chair, ran over to the microwave, shut it off, started yelling at me. I can't repeat some of the things that he said. I don't want to swear at all. Pulled it out of there and said, "Kremens, what do you think you're doing?" And I said, "Oh my God, what happened? I'm just making lunch. I'm having my SpaghettiOs. I'm looking forward to them. Now I can't have them. I'm going to have to eat them cold because you pulled them out of the microwave." What I didn't realize was that the little container was metal, right? It was wrapped in this weird plastic, and I probably should have read the label more carefully. I definitely should have read the label more carefully. But he said, "Man, you could have had the whole microwave catch on fire by putting that in there. Didn't you read it? Aren't you going to college for English or something? What's your problem?" And this went on for a little bit. But what I realized, and the reason I'm telling you this story and what makes it so memorable for me, is just that memory of him not only scolding me a little bit, but also trying to give me a lesson. Like, be more careful, be more observant of your surroundings, particularly in an environment like that where there's so many things happening. There's these giant machines, and you've got your coworkers that you have to look out for and protect. And the lesson that he was trying to convey to me, I realize now, and what made that moment so memorable, aside from the fact that I was embarrassed that I'd almost destroyed the company's microwave, was the fact that he was looking out for me. We came from very different backgrounds. This was a guy who had told me stories about seeing Jimi Hendrix in the late 1960s when he was a kid, and that was exciting for me. So we found a way to sort of bond over music, and he kind of took me under his wing. He kind of made sure that I didn't get into trouble at the job. I did it as well as I could, made sure that I didn't blow up any microwaves, right? So even though I don't remember all the daily tasks that were involved in that particular time, in that particular job, what I do remember is that kindness from someone who was not only trying to teach me a lesson, but also was trying to welcome me in to the work environment where he'd been for years and years and years. Now, I tell you that story, and I mentioned my short time making mirrors for compacts like this, so that you could then also think of something that you could write about. Now, for this week, I only need a paragraph. I want you to think, I want you to brainstorm a little bit, and I want you to tell me a story about a workplace that you've been in. What was it like? What do you remember about it? For you, it's probably a lot closer than it is to me. The memory that I'm telling you about is 30 years back. Hopefully for you, it's a lot more recent than that. If it's not, maybe yours is also far back, and maybe by a couple of decades. See how much you can remember and write that down. That's going to be the basis for what will become the first paper for the class. So use your imagination a little bit, but also use your memory. That's what good writing comes from, is remembering and then trying to convey those memories to someone else. So think about that a little bit, okay? I'll talk to you again soon.